Good morning, everyone. My name's Alex. Welcome to our webinar today, Defining Your Digital Workspace with Office 365. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, feel free to use the GoToWebinar functionality to answer a question. And we'll have some time at the end of the webinar for questions as well. And if you have any technical difficulties, just give Tahita a call on the number shown. So today, what are we talking about? Well, there's a lot of things within Office 365 beyond email that help organisations be more productive. And I'm sure if you've already purchased Office 365 or you're considering it, you'll realise there's so much more available than just, obviously your email and moving your files up into the cloud. And so, although we don't want to talk about everything within Office 365 because we'll be here for a while, we do want to talk about 4 new apps within Office 365 that we really think are worth knowing about. And from there, looking at, well, how do we define the digital workspace? How do we help organisations better share information across their colleagues? Take things out of email as a way to, improve the intellectual property of the organisation and just better sharing and work better together. So what we'll do is we'll talk about how you can do that, but importantly, some of the gotchas and some of the challenges that we see in organisations going that way. And from there, also introducing our SharePoint Quick Start, which is a way that a solution that we've built that helps organisations start this journey. And as I mentioned before, there'll be time for questions at the end. So just a quick introduction to Superfluid. Superfluid is a subsidiary company of Brennan IT. We're 100% owned by Brennan, and we specialise in the application space within Office 365. So we have primarily developers and also consultants, business analysts in our team, and they specialise in helping organisations get the most out of Dynamics 365, also SharePoint, and through that a lot of software integrations as well. So when we talk about productivity, I like to remind myself that we're in year 2017 yet. I think many organisations still struggle with too much email. We've all got full inboxes, they just keep filling up. There's competitions internally on how many unread emails have we got, and it's still pretty frustrating. At the same time, we've seen a lot of organisations have now successfully implemented lots of shadow IT that we called out 5 or 6 years ago. In many cases, were being set up by different departments within organisations. And although some of those solutions are working really well, they're not often fully integrated inside the broader organisation. Further to that, I touched on before, but Office 365 adds a lot more than just simply email, and I'm sure you're all aware of that. And so there's this challenge that organisations say, well, we know Office 365 is called a productivity suite. There's a lot of other things in there, but we're not really being as productive as we'd like. And we want to come up with a better way, a better workspace in how we can actually work together as organisations. And ultimately, collaboration tools will work better when tools are officially implemented and sanctioned, and people are told how to use them and when to use them. McKinsey recently came out with a report around advanced social technologies for businesses and the future of collaboration. And it was a really interesting finding that they had was that organisations that have taken on some of these newer productivity-based technologies were reducing their usage of traditional technologies such as email and phone, but at the same time they were communicating more frequently and they're getting better outcomes as organisations. And so I wanted to share this data just to give you a feel for the fact that there is, although there's been a bit of hype around social technologies, we're now coming to that point where they're maturing. People are figuring out how to use this inside their organisations, and certainly McKinsey's reporting, seeing some good benefits that organisations are having as a result. I've got this slide in here introducing Office 365 primarily as a way to maybe shock you a little bit, in a nice way, of course, on how much value is actually packed into Office 365. This is called the periodic table of Office 365 and was developed by a SharePoint consultant in the US called Matt Wade. And the point of this slide is not to say I'm going to step through each one of these because I'll be here for a while if I did, but to call out that a lot of the applications you'd be often familiar with are on the bottom left, which is the mail, the calendar, Yammer, and so forth. The thing is, though, that there is a lot more in Office 365. And so the first part of this webinar is really just to introduce you to 4 tools that we see are going to be more and more popular. And from there, then take you through how you can establish your own digital workspace in the knowledge of some of these tools that are available. So with that in mind, the first tool I'd like to introduce you to is Microsoft Flow. Microsoft Flow is a drag and drop workflow builder. You've got a screenshot here on the right, and it's really good for organizations who don't have strong IT people or a lot of people internally who are strong at developing hard coding software. Instead can now drag and drop workflows and create workflows and things as they need them. So for example, they're very good for expense claims and also managing things like marketing requests and having simple approvals that might go through. This screenshot on the right shows how Microsoft Flow can be used to connect, say, something like Microsoft Dynamics 365 to MailChimp. And Microsoft Flow itself actually connects to over 100 different third-party applications. So it's definitely beyond just integrating with other Microsoft Office 365 apps, but it is a very good way to be able to very quickly and easily drag and drop and create workflows when you don't have a lot of resource internally to be able to do them yourselves, or need to get external consultants to do them. The next thing I'd like to introduce is Power Apps. So where I talked about workflows and being able to trigger off things to go and get approvals, the first thing you often need is a form. And so Microsoft Power Apps is a way that you can build mobile apps internally, such as expense requests, where you could take a photo on your mobile of a receipt and then put that into Power Apps and send it through to Flow for an approval. The great thing about Power Apps, it's not just a form solution. You can create mini apps, so you can pull in information from your CRM or other systems such as SharePoint and actually provide an interface for people to be able to work off. So the example here shows an asset register where we're allocating a new asset on, Microsoft Surface Pro tablet in this case. So what you can do here is you can use Power Apps to create an interface which makes it really easy to create forms and little apps within the organization, and then trigger them off with Flow to actually go and get, say, for approvals for maybe an asset requisition. If you're running old versions of SharePoint, it's worth knowing that InfoPath is obviously has been deprecated by Microsoft, and as a result, it's a good solution instead to be able to use. The next application I'd like to take you through is Microsoft Planner. I've walked into many organizations who have often got lots of post-its up on walls, and Kanban boards and agile ways of working are becoming quite the norm. And there's a company called Trello who've made a very nice product around this. And Microsoft have also created their own Kanban tool known as Planner, which is an Office 365. Planner is built with a view of being able to collaborate, and so you can create a plan with people within your organization and assign security and assign permissions so that people can come and join that. It's perfect for mid to lightweight complexity sort of projects. We use it internally for content planning, for digital content on the web. You can use it also for client projects where if you haven't got the need for a really detailed project management tool such as Microsoft Project, Planner is a very effective way of being able to track tasks and assign them to people and then see them when they're completed. Finally, Microsoft Teams is a new collaboration application, which it's based off a chat-based interface, but it's much, much more than that. The idea is it really emphasizes using your applications and having conversations around those. So you'll see here that I've highlighted this little top bar of tabs. And what we're able to do here is we have, in this case, it's a group about Dynamics 365, and I can see a conversation view. I can also see a file view as well as a OneNote view, so we might have shared notes about this particular topic, or it could be a client project for that matter. I've also got the planner, which I showed you, so we could have a Kanban board, and we've got now conversations and activities and project management associated. SharePoint might hold some artifacts and assets which we need to refer to, and I might even have some Power BI information coming through. So the idea with Microsoft Teams is it's able to bring all of these different applications you might be working with in the organization together, and to be able to have conversation about it and start having putting conversations in context with the actual tools that you're working on. Where we see it work really well is for project-based type work and also team-based conversations. So you might run a sales meeting in Microsoft Teams. You could put all the notes and the files that are relevant to the sales meeting. You could also have your CRM and have maybe the pipeline up in the tab as well. So the idea is that you can bring this bring this with all these different tools together to actually have conversations in context. And obviously through that process can actually help massively reduce your email. And because it's also available on mobile, it does mean that people can access a lot of this information when they're out and about. The challenge, of course, is that these are all just separate tools. And although Microsoft Teams is a very, very big tool in itself and one that we see as an application is going to grow quite a lot in popularity. Common challenges we have sometimes within Microsoft, with these that obviously we need to have a mechanism to provide one-to-many communications outside of email. So minimizing BCC or those emails and making sure that we've got a mechanism to be able to send messages out. Helping your people find an official resource is really important. So how do they know which group to trust in Teams that's got the official information or the planner? They're all really, really important aspects of being able to provide your people direction. So when you go to build a digital workspace, they actually know which place to go to. From a governance perspective, thinking about naming conventions and what we call the information architecture, which is how things are designed, and thinking about security is also really important. An example of this is as a group within Superfluid, we've been using Microsoft Teams for about a year. And at the beginning, we just set up a few different teams just to see how it worked. And we found that sometimes we'd have a team called clients and then subgroups under that for each client. And other times we'd want to have a whole team for clients, depending on security and the types of projects they were doing. And that's just a very simple example of the fact that it's really important you think around naming conventions and how you actually want to structure these tools so that you can maximize the usefulness for them internally and also provide clarity for your people so they know how to use them. Obviously, specifically around Microsoft Teams, not everything does work in a feed, and I touched on it before that sometimes you do want to send broadcast emails out to people in the traditional sense and BCC people. You need to be able to have a simple reference where it's always got the truth at the top of the page, and in a feed type model, conversations can rapidly drop below what we call the fold, and thus it's important that we can surface information that's important up the top. Further to that, thinking about when you've got content on file servers or Google Drive or other locations, you might be wanting to move that up to Office 365, but the challenge, of course, is that it's best to define what the end state is before you actually move there, because you don't want to move things twice and cause confusion for people actually trying to find information. So those are some of the challenges. And so how we see this actually being fixed is through using something like Microsoft SharePoint. And although we see Microsoft SharePoint as taking a little bit of a back step in terms of how we see tooling work forward, it's a very powerful platform to be able to help pull all this information together. So, for example, you can use SharePoint as a traditional intranet, but importantly, use it as a way to mark where the official resource is. And I'll show you some screenshots in a minute to help illustrate what I'm meaning there. But as an example, you might decide to set up a form center, and you might have gone down your journey of setting up forms. So for example, you might have some in Power Apps, but you might also have a lot still on Microsoft Word or even Excel or PDF. And ultimately, you want to have one spot for all your forms. And so there's no real solution in Teams or Planner or any of the other ones, the tools I spoke about, that naturally provides that ability to be able to cross technologies. And that's where you can use SharePoint as a way to actually help people and guide your people to where that information is. And you're able to take away the technology solution of, is it a Power App form or is it a Word file, and just think about where is the form I need to fill in as an end user. SharePoint, of course, being able to be used as a traditional intranet does suit really well for one-to-many communications. So you can put news items up the top and you can put sort of broad organizational announcements up there and actually have that as an official place and your official home. I mentioned before you can use it as a handoff to the collaboration tools and eForms, and again our screenshots in the next couple of slides will help illustrate that. And ultimately, SharePoint is a really powerful platform that can also provide context around Flow and Power Apps. So for example, in Microsoft Flow, I might have something in there that I need approved. SharePoint can actually be effectively the data store for the information under that flow. And for Power Apps, again, I might want to take photos of a receipt. Again, those images will actually stay in SharePoint. Further to that, if I've got some more traditional document management requirements and I need to put really strong governance around life cycles, SharePoint's got a really good engine to be able to put in rules around when documents should be archived and deleted, for example, after 7 years. So we still think SharePoint has a place. The challenge, of course, though, with SharePoint when we start talking about intranets is that many organizations, if they build an intranet, suddenly need to find someone for internal comms function to actually keep the homepage current. Because the challenge is if you're going down this path of building a digital workspace, but then your homepage to where you're saying here is the roadmap on where you can find everything inside your organization, if that homepage doesn't actually change, then it makes it really difficult to, or it makes it very difficult for people to actually still trust it because they start seeing it as stale and stagnant. And so with that in mind, what we've built is a SharePoint Quick Start. And this is a collection of artifacts and assets that we've developed that we can implement into clients' Office 365 environments. And the key thing here is that it's almost entirely dynamic. So we want to take away the internal communications requirement from our clients having to manage that need of having an internal comms function. And instead, what we've got is just a very simple homepage, which at the very top, you can see here, there's 2 news items. But aside from that, everything else is dynamic on the page. So if I very quickly go down, you've got my followed sites and people around me, recent sites and recent documents, and all of those are actually being pulled from what we call the Office graph. And so what we're able to do is pull information about how your people are actually using Office 365 and present information back to them that's really relevant. So seeing their colleagues and being able to explore content that their colleagues are creating, of course, that's been security trimmed. And it really helps make this much more relevant to the user when they load it up, but also it fixes that real estate issue of trying to create news for the sake of creating news and having technology lead the conversation, which is what we don't want to do. On the top right of the page, we've got some tiles. Now, these are also something that's included in the Quick Start. And what we found with clients was they wanted an ability to very quickly create links that had icons and colors, and just made it intuitive to very quickly link off to areas of importance and other applications. There's nothing really native in SharePoint that does that. So our tiles component is something that allows you to change the colors really easily. There's about 40,000 icons that you can pick from, and it can be used by someone with not a lot of technical skill just to right click and make the changes they need. And below those tiles in the top right, you've got staff milestones and new starters. Those are all coming from Active Directory. So again, that information's automatically been populated so we can see when someone's had a work anniversary. We can see if someone's birthday is coming up. And also there's a new starters feed which shows if someone's just joined the organization recently. Below that in the aqua color is a little component we call company values. And the idea there is that you're able to rotate either, typically values, but other messages in the company, and often assign a color and some text to them, and it'll just randomly display that. So again, it's a subtle way of being able to show some things that are important to your organization. So the key thing is that it's an automated homepage. I don't want to draw too much on it, except to say that this is really just the way into the information for a digital workspace. The key thing and why we've developed this is that Microsoft are busy updating the SharePoint development framework. SharePoint very soon, and in fact already does support a mobile responsive view. It's not quite ready yet for companies to jump across to, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end about that if you have any, but it's very near that. And the thing is, all these components here actually need to be upgraded. So what we're doing as part of the quick start is we're providing effectively an extended warranty where we'll go along and we'll upgrade those components to make sure that it continues to work for you. So, and obviously if anything breaks, then we'll fix that as well. So if I jump across, if you can imagine you're at a consulting firm and you're in the management consulting practice, and you've clicked through from your homepage, and one of those tiles has led you to this page, or on the top menu you see there where you might have landed. What we want to do here is we want to help organisations, and when you're thinking about building a digital workspace, and that challenge I said around helping people know where to find the right plan or the right group of teams. What we can do is use SharePoint, and on the right-hand side, you've seen these tiles that I've put in here, which is placeholders that say there might be a consulting team. There's also a strategic consulting subgroup. There's an all-company team, and then there might be something on certifications and training, and maybe also a planner for bench projects. So this is a way that helps people very quickly find the teams that they need to be joining, and they can start collaborating in that new technology, but in a way that you're actually helping them find what they need. And then in the middle, underneath that consulting artifact, is this way of thinking about a life cycle of a document. So say for this organization, they've been doing some great work with their clients in teams, and they've finished off a nice document they want to now create as the standard artifact for their clients. Well, what they can do now is they can put it into this space in this document library in a management consulting practice. And this effectively becomes the master source for any of those official documents. And so again, it makes it easy so people don't need to search too far. They naturally know where to find different things. And again, we could have a forms center set up here, which would also show people where to go for the right form. So I've got only a couple of slides left, but really to help you on this journey, if you're looking at figuring out how do we set this digital workspace up, the first thing we'd say is set up some sort of base intranet that helps serve as sort of an official street sign. Ultimately, this is a change management exercise, and you want to be able to have something that helps guide people to where they want to be working over time. So as things change, it provides a vehicle for you to be able to help support that change, but also it provides an opportunity for you to be able to capture that information. It doesn't naturally sit in the other applications I took you through. The next thing I'd recommend you do is work at a team-by-team basis and look at how they work and potentially why they're spending so much time in email, who they're collaborating with, as a view to then come up with a bit of a blueprint on what the end state could look like. So thinking about, can they use Planner? Maybe they're already using Trello, in which case maybe that is still suitable for them. But thinking about all the different tools that they're using, come up with that blueprint on what's going to work for them. And then at that point, you've now determined what the end state solution is. It's now the right time to consider migrating your content to the cloud. So that's looking at saying, well, once we know what our structure is within SharePoint or Teams or Planner, we can now think about picking up those file shares or old versions of SharePoint and moving them into team sites in SharePoint or into Microsoft Teams, for example, for that content. Also, if you need to do any integration, that's the time to do that work as well. And ultimately, then there's a training aspect in helping people understand the blueprint and why. Change management really begins at step 0, but as I said, it is throughout, and certainly having a base sort of intranet that helps act as that vehicle for change will support you a lot. I've got 7 tips that I want to share with you to get you started in defining your digital workspace. The first thing is, I touched on before, have a plan for some consistent naming conventions. So we've found, certainly with clients and ourselves as well, when we started playing with Teams a year or so ago, that it is important that you set a structure around naming conventions. So back to, if you're talking about clients, do you want to have a single client folder with sub-clients? Or would you rather have separate team group by security requirements? And we covered that's more in step 3. They'll come to. Further to that, just work groups aren't too sensitive about the security needs. Although often HR and finance teams are really good beneficiaries of things like SharePoint because it's quite private to them. So what we do recommend is you start maybe with a marketing team or a bid management team or a team that's often very keen to push their content out to other people within the organisation. And by starting with those, you're able to test with a group that are probably very open to it, won't have a lot of barriers in terms of natural reasons why they need to protect a lot of information. But also because other people, such as finance or HR might be still using those, they start to get comfortable with the technology and the concepts and how security is actually managed in those, because it is actually managed, it's just managed a little bit differently. And so it's an easier way in. Talking about security, there's a thing we call inheritance of security, and what you don't want to do is break inheritance. And breaking inheritance is where you have a set of security rules at the very top of a hierarchy, and as you go down, you change those rules. By doing so, it can cause some governance challenges. So when you're thinking around how you actually create this new end state, we'd recommend that you do have a bit of a consideration around how do we want to manage security so that we can keep it as consistent as possible and from a hierarchy perspective. I highlighted the tabs in Microsoft Teams, and I'd really recommend if you are going down the path of Microsoft Teams, you really think about how you can use those tabs to really enrich the user experience. The point of Teams, in my view, is that it's something beyond Yammer. So if you just want a conversation thread, then Yammer is there, and it does a really good job at doing what it does. However, Teams is really around collaborating and working across your applications and being able to take conversations out of email. And so ultimately have a think about how you can use the tabs within Teams to actually really make that user experience as powerful as possible. And from there, you're starting to create this digital workspace. You're starting to create a spot where people can do all of their work in context, and whether they're on mobile or their desktop, actually work together. If you've got the luxury of time, and we know that not everyone does, we would recommend you actually migrate your content in stages to Office 365 rather than all at once. So of course, email is different. You tend to want to try and move that fairly quickly. But when it comes to these digital workspaces, if we're thinking about going team by team, say in my example before, using marketing and starting with them, or a bid management team to manage bids, then what it might make sense, or what it generally makes sense to do, is to actually just migrate the content for that team rather than everyone else. So not always is that possible. Often we find licensing requirements mean that, or you might be moving sites or something like that, that suddenly brings forward a content migration. But if you do have the luxury of time, I would say go team by team. Just calling out, mobility is hugely alive in Office 365. There's oodles of applications out there on Android as well as iPhone that you can use. So really think about mobility and put it front and center when you're thinking around these digital workspaces, because there's some really good applications now available from Microsoft that will help you really take your work out to where your people are. And ultimately, a lot of us spend more time on our smartphone than we do our laptop. So it is a really good thing to just be aware of. And as I said, have something, if you can, as a base intranet to start with. It'll really support your change management and also act as a source of truth. So where you've got things that don't naturally fit into Microsoft Teams and you're trying to have, say, for example, a form center, something like that, just a simple intranet really helps. And ultimately, our quick start is designed to provide you that, but without the maintenance overhead that often comes from having an intranet and an internal comms team. So a quick plug in terms of where we can help if you need us. Obviously, we've got the intranet quick start. We can help you get going there. If you'd like assistance in migrating your content and working out the best way to move that up into the cloud, we're usually doing 2 or 3 content migrations at any one time. From a forms and workflow perspective, if you are keen to digitize your paper-based forms or your PDF-based forms, electronic paper, into something like Power Apps and use Flow to automate those, then again, certainly we've got our business analysts are able to help out with that. And of course, from a digital workspace perspective, if you'd like to go through this process with us, then obviously we'd be delighted to assist. But that said, I hope that the tips there I've provided will help you get started if you are keen to go it alone. Certainly some of the tips that we like to follow ourselves internally. So I'm sure it'll give you a good start. So with that in mind, I'll open the floor to any questions you might have. We've had a question around Microsoft Planner, and does it have the ability to do some basic resource loading? It doesn't really. Planner's a good tool to assign tasks to people. I know that Microsoft are rapidly evolving it, and so even what I'm saying now could get out of date very quickly. But we're typically seeing Planner as a way to modify, Planner, sorry, I got distracted there, but we'd see typically Planner as a way to manage tasks, and even the URL to Planner is actually tasks.microsoft rather than planner.microsoft. And a follow-up question, is Planner integrated with Microsoft Project? No, it's not. So the two are actually quite separate. And so as an organization, you'll need to sort of make that decision around, well, there's a lot of really detailed reporting and obviously project controls you get from Microsoft Project, and it is a really powerful tool. I don't know that Planner will get to that stage. I think it's more really to help people with more lightweight tasks and, as I said, more Kanban. So I think we'll see a lot more capability built in around that, but I don't see it replacing Microsoft Project. I think they're two different things. We've got one more question. How do you see Nintex being impacted by Flow? For those of you who don't know, Nintex is a really powerful application that does forms and workflow, and we're a partner of Nintex. It's a phenomenal product. They've been around for a while. Nintex, I would see, is used for really complex workflows. So where you've got lots of people being involved, you might want to do lots of switching between business units for a workflow. That's where Nintex can be used very well. I think where Flow fits is actually under Nintex. So where you've got a requirement to do some automation within your organization, but don't necessarily have the appetite for spending thousands of dollars on licensing for maybe what you consider a fairly trivial workflows. Microsoft Flow is a very good fit there. But I don't think Nintex and Flow I'd see as competitors. I think Nintex is really, once you've got to a stage where you've got something very detailed that you need done, Nintex is a very good tool for that. Not taking away from Flow though, I think Flow's very, very good for getting started, and actually Microsoft are doing so much work with it. I think it will keep evolving quite quickly. In terms of that, I mean, just as a side, Nintex also does offer other things. So things like document generation, it's very good at as well. So it's a little bit more now than just a workflow tool. So I haven't got any more questions. So thank you very much for your time.